I felt that I lost respect in that moment. I certainly lost respect for myself. And so if I were to go back and redo that, if I could have a do-over for that, that would be great.
Most leaders think the hardest part of running a creative company is the creative. It's not. It's staying true to the work when the team is looking to you for direction and the safe choice keeps presenting itself. The leaders who build something that lasts are the ones who decide what they won't compromise on before the pressure arrives. I'm Dr. Gary, and this is Leading from the Front. Jen Moss is co-founder of JAR Podcast Solutions. After nearly 2 decades in radio, documentary, and digital storytelling, including 8 years producing award-winning work at CBC and the National Film Board of Canada. Today, JAR works with brands like Amazon, Lululemon, and RBC to build podcasts that actually perform. Jen built JAR around a simple belief: great stories move people. And the way you bring people in, keep them engaged, and move them towards something that matters, whether you're making a podcast or running a team. But leading a company means your attention shifts from the work to the people doing it. And eventually the story you're most responsible for is no longer your own. In this episode, she gets honest about that tension and what she's still figuring out. So your history is interesting, right? You went from being, in theater, journalism, documentary maker at CBC.
Yeah, audio documentary. I was trained in that. And then I went over to the National Film Board of Canada, did that for a while, worked in new media storytelling, immersive media storytelling, things like VR, interactive. So really have thought a lot about story and form and how those things fit together.
So this is a podcast on leadership.
Right.
And storytelling for leaders is one of the most important skills that they can learn. It's not the most, but it's one of the most. And in fact, I think that the United States, the greatest president that ever lived is Abraham Lincoln. He saved this country. We were in civil war and he was able to pull it back together. And he often told stories to get his point across. And to the point where some of his staff were like, oh, no, another story.
Here goes Abe again.
Here goes Abe again, right? So where do you see this idea of storytelling having the greatest impact? Where have you seen that?
So my training as a journalist really kind of steeped me in this idea that you will get an idea across to an audience faster and you will make a more lasting impression if you use a story to get that idea across. So if I tell you, it's a long way to walk to the top of Grouse Mountain, which is a nearby mountain, and, it's a very tiring journey, that's me imparting a fact to you. Mm-hmm. But if I tell you it's 6 a.m., my muscles are stiff, but I'm standing at the bottom of a trail called the Grouse Grind, and I'm wondering why I'm here, how I got here, whether I'm crazy. It's not even light yet, but I'm standing here and I'm actually worried that I'm not going to make it to the top because I'm middle-aged and I haven't been training, but it's a point of honor. I really want to make it to the top. So here we go. That's different. I've given you some details. I've made it personal. I've set myself up in an environment that you can picture. And so when you are engaged picturing that environment, it's dark, it's cold, there's big, tall, towering green cedar trees, and there's a trail that just goes up at seems like a 90-degree angle when you're standing at the bottom of it. So your brain is working to picture that. You are fully engaged. Whereas if I just tell you it's a hard hike, you're going to be like, yeah, whatever.
So I'm a leader. You're going to coach me or teach me. How would you start to teach me if I'm not a good storyteller?
Great question. And this comes up a lot, actually, when we're dealing with podcast guests, because a lot of podcasts that we make are in kind of technical verticals like quantum computing or finance, right? So we do deal with a lot of kind of black and white thinkers and people who are like, just the facts, ma'am, right? So I think what I start by doing is get really curious about the person, and I try to go back. So like, how did you get into this line of work? What is it that you like about it? Maybe the thing they like is clarity. Maybe the thing they like is they like things to have a right or a wrong answer, right? But like figuring out what is their personal connection to the work they do, I think I would start there. And then I would say slow down and break it down. When they tell me something that they did, I might ask a few questions around that, like, okay, pause there. When you did that action, how did that feel? What would have happened if you hadn't done that, right? Because you need to kind of unpack the moment. Like, what were the stakes? Who was involved? What did you think you should do and what did you feel are two very different questions. So I make sure to ask both, right? So just like slowing down and unpacking each moment. I have heard some really brilliant storytellers, they can break down something simple like unwrapping a cough candy and make it fascinating. They can describe the crinkle. They can describe the tickle in their throat. They can talk about what would happen in the middle of the opera if they suddenly had a coughing fit, right? And suddenly you're in the middle of a story. It's a story, and it's just unwrapping a cough candy. So there's nothing that can't be storyified if you take your time.
It's interesting as you were describing this. Our leadership programs teach self-awareness. It's completely about self-awareness and mindset. So we start with understanding what's going on in here because leadership development is an inside-out process. Well, you just described storytelling as an inside-out process. The first thing I would do is ask them, what's their experiences? What do they remember? And then start getting into the detail of that, which makes people mindful, thinking back historically on something that happened. And then we can translate that into a present experience.
It's definitely one of my favorite things to do. And another simple trick that I've learned for helping people unpack story is Ira Glass, who's, of course, probably the most famous podcaster in the world. Ira Glass has described telling a story as being sort of a series of beats, like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And then kind of a reflection. And here's what I thought about it. Here's what I felt about it. Here's what it made me realize. So with a bit of a lesson at the end. So quite often, a case study in a business context will be something like, we did this and we saw this much growth. And everybody's like, great, bully for you. And they don't really care. The audience doesn't care. But if you were to say, there was this really big problem that we noticed or that we were made aware of, and this was what it looked like. This was what it felt like. This was how gnarly the problem was. Yeah. And so far it had been dealt with in this way, but it wasn't working, and here's why. And these are the people that it was affecting. And this was why we wanted to get involved. This was our motivation for trying to even solve this problem, right? So go like back to the beginning and then tell us what you did and then tell us the impact.
And tell us the struggle. Tell us the arguments that we had at 2:00 in the morning when we were so tired that we couldn't see straight, and we started yelling at each other. And then we realized, oh my God, that's it. Because we break down all of our exterior and interior barriers, and all of a sudden we opened up to each other. Yeah, sometimes emotionally, sometimes not positively. Yeah. But it actually ends up bringing us together. So,
gosh, that's so true.
Yeah. Telling those stories is powerful. So how did you make the transition from, where you were to where you are?
I was working in radio for a long time. I was a producer. And I was responsible for a show that had to go on the air at 6 a.m. every morning. Very small team of people putting it together. Basically myself and a couple of interns.
Waking up at 3:00 in the morning, right?
Well, yeah. And then staying up late because somebody canceled and you had to plug a hole for the next morning. Like it was a hellish, but very sort of potent learning experience.
Yeah.
Anyways, Roger Nairn, my business partner, was at the time doing a podcast aimed at men, helping them not be jerks. And I was like, well, first of all, I support that. Secondly, I'm being a bit flippant, but helping men describe the experience of contemporary manhood and what it means to be a good guy in this day and age. And so he would show up at like 5:30 on time, chipper, coffee in hand, ready to go. And I was like, okay, well, this person has a very good work ethic and, seems to have good morals, like somebody I could work with and not be offended by. He had worked in advertising for many years, and he wanted to do something more toothsome with brands, like help brands tell bigger, more muscular stories. And I had worked in storytelling for a long time in the public sphere, but I really wanted to sort of take some of those ideas and stories and skills into the corporate sphere and help brands tell better stories as well. So we had a common goal. And so that's how I got kind of sucked into it.
What mindset did you have to change in order to make that transition?
I think there's always push and pull factors. So in my case, I've always been a sort of, if the door opens, go through it sort of mouse. So what had happened was the radio station where we were working, or where I was working, was sort of in its death throes. But I was really sort of thinking, well, what should my next step be? And so the timing was right. There were a lot of kind of factors. The timing was right. The people were right. The skills that he had, and we originally had another partner, Aaron, and that he brought a lot of technical skills. So we sort of had complementary skill sets. So we figured we think we can do this. And there was a model for it. There was a company called Pacific Content out of Vancouver, British Columbia, run by our friend Steve Pratt. He was very generous with his suggestions, and he was like, come on in, the water's warm, there's room for everyone, like, don't worry about it. And in fact, gave us some of our earliest clients, handed them over because they weren't quite right for his organization at the time. So we had a lot of support. The podcast industry in general is very supportive ecosystem where, you know, the philosophy really is a rising tide floats all boats, because it's still a relatively new industry. Mm-hmm. Then COVID happened, and we, at first there was a huge dip in streaming services because nobody was driving to work, so nobody was listening to podcasts on the way to work, which was the predominant way that people consume them in 2019. But within like partway through 2020, the streaming numbers went way up higher than they'd ever been, because all people could do was listen to podcasts. Nobody could go to a conference. So every company was like, we better start a podcast. So we actually got very busy very quickly. So I think our timing was good, and we were a little bit out in front of the curve.
What do you think were some of the biggest barriers to you, or challenges, or things that, well, you know, mistakes that were made that we call experience?
I think when we started the company, we kind of weren't sure exactly what our business model would be. We were taking a bit of a test and learn approach, which I know is like against all business advice. So we didn't know, for example, would we bring kind of a fully baked idea to a brand and be like, hey, you guys want to get on board and make this podcast? It's already successful over here. Or look, it's got a bunch of great actors in it. Do you want to sign your name to this? We didn't know if we would do that, like where we would license IPs or create IPs and then bring brands along for the ride. Or would we go in at the ground floor with brands and be like, hey, have you thought about doing a podcast? Here's why we think it's a good idea. We had to do a lot of educating about what a podcast even was at first. We don't really have to do that anymore, but we used to. So yeah, it was like not the clearest business model to start off. And so we had to learn the hard way that brands, if they're going to spend money, they want that involvement, especially up front. They want to know that the podcast is going to serve their mission, it's going to fit their values, that it's going to be measurable in some way, shape or form, right, in terms of the ROI. So we got a very quick lesson in all of that, got better at describing and delivering that. And that is primarily what we do now, with a few exceptions. Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest problem that can be had is, you know, people use this word brand in marketing all the time. And I believe that they don't know what the simple definition of brand is. Mm-hmm. And the simple definition is this: it's my promise to the customer. So whether it's a international brand like IBM that comes on and says something, and what they're doing is they're saying, this is our promise to you. Okay. Or it's a local restaurant. This is our promise to you. It's really getting clear on what the promise is. And I think that podcasts are a way for us to demonstrate a clearer message around what our promise is.
It is almost like an embodied dialogue with your customer and your target audience. And I don't use those words entirely interchangeably. Your customers being people who are already buying the service or product that you make, or who are poised to do so. Whereas an audience more being like a group of people that may contain customers or potential future customers, but may also contain other people who are just kind of interested and peering over the fence, right? So I think a podcast is an awareness building exercise for a brand or organization. And I think it can be a way of educating people on a question that is hard to explain in a soundbite. So like if more people understood this thing, perhaps your company would sell more of whatever it is you sell. But there's this idea that first has to be unpacked. I mean, I can give you an example. We do make a quantum computing podcast for a company called D-Wave. And their biggest challenge is that everybody thinks quantum computing is kind of like this drifty, cosmic, like you've smoked too much weed and now you're talking about quantum computing kind of thing. And actually, it's a very applicable way of making computing much more efficient when used in particular points in the compute process. So in some problems, quantum can solve problems much faster than classical computing. In other areas, classical computing makes more sense. So it's just a question of how does quantum get inserted into real world environments? And that's what our show is about. That's something that more business people need to understand, more operations people need to understand. And if they did, then this company could potentially, sell more of its work. So it makes sense for them to educate the public, the business going public, about how quantum can be applied. And again, not something you can do in a soundbite.
I've worked for a lot of technology companies that were like Novell and other companies that create great technological outcomes. And the idea is people need to understand, if you can't understand the physics behind it, you don't need to. This is the input. This is the output. Will it work for you?
Exactly. Yeah.
The output is the promise to the customer. This is what promise we can do, right? Whether it's our leadership development program, our promise is to develop leadership effectiveness, and our mission is to make good bosses into great leaders with compassionate accountability.
You inspire people, right? You want to inspire them. And to me...
And a story is the way to do it, right? You don't inspire people with facts, right? So one of the things that we do in leadership is we have everybody write a personal mission statement. And the personal mission statement helps remind us of the anchor of who we are and what we want to be, so that we're holding ourselves accountable to that standard every single day to be the best possible version of ourselves. So when we do executive coaching, I say, how's your personal mission statement coming? When's the last time you read it? How are you holding yourself accountable? So all of these stories get kind of codified into a paragraph or a page that helps remind people what's important in their life, because life can kick us in the ass, kick us around, and then we forget, we do stupid stuff. And I think that's where these stories that stick in our head are very helpful for us, right? And I think that what's missing in the work that you're doing is helping organizations express that story through the leadership of that organization that says, what's important to you? What are you trying to create? What's the brand? What's your promise? So this is a lot of what you do is just really important stuff, and how you help people codify these stories into a meaningful expression of what's important.
A couple of things came to mind for me while you were talking. So one is that I think you're bang on. We are trying to help our customers, which are brands, figure out kind of what story they're most equipped to tell that would be of the most help to their target audience, or like in the case of leadership, that would be of the most help to your employees. So in fact, we do work with Amazon. They make an internal podcast with Doug Harrington, one of their CEOs. They have several. And it's really about Amazon culture and how it works and who are the leaders and what path did they take to get there. And there's 4,000 or I don't know how many employees.
Tens of thousands. Like tens of thousands.
Yeah, tens of thousands. So there's a lot of employees that are quite interested. The numbers are quite good, even though we've just launched this little internal show and not done a lot of promotion. It's just sort of, it's grabbing people's attention because it's offering something from the leadership back to the employees. And then if you think of a B2C podcast, that's what I would call an internal podcast aimed back down at the employees. But there are ones that are more like outward looking. Mm-hmm. And in those ones, I'm always asking, like, what is the conversation that's going on right now in the world, in the zeitgeist, that matters right now, that you think that your company or your brand or your philosophy, like that you have something to bring to that conversation? Or what's the conversation that you wish was happening that isn't happening that you would like to hear? Maybe we can make that happen. So just trying to think about like where the conversation is taking place. Is it an internal one? Is it an external one? I'm really good at telling other people what I think they should do. It's much harder when I turn it on myself. But I have learned a few things the hard way.
Like what?
Telling my own stuff, what my vision is. Well, I have there's a kind of feminist model of leadership that is really strengths-based, where you really try to deal with who you have, who's dedicated. I mean, I have basic standards. People have to be dedicated and hardworking, or I'm not going to truck with them, right? Like I just can't be bothered. Yeah. But everyone that works with me is incredibly dedicated, smart, and hardworking. So that's almost like table stakes at JAR. Right?
Yep.
So then it's like, okay, well, what are they good at now? What do they want to do? What are the traps that they fall into? How can I help them avoid those traps? Am I making sure to listen to what it is that they want and how they want to grow, and sort of trying to make room for that? That might mean helping someone make a lateral move, or that might mean promoting from within, or that might mean changing the title of their job to reflect what it is that they're excellent at, right? That kind of thing. Sure. So that's the sort of thing I try to do. So then within all of that, I myself can get a little bit lost, because I'm definitely a facilitator. I'm swimming around, but who am I and what is my vision? My vision actually is that I want the team to surface an idea. And so they're looking for me to give them the answer. And I'm saying, actually, I think we as a group can come up with this answer. Right. And that's not always clear to people. Like, I think so sometimes I probably exhibit a lack of clarity as a leader, because I don't naturally fall into like, here's what we're going to do and here's how we're going to do it. Right. I just don't. Right.
This is the problem with leadership. It depends.
Right.
And there's no shoulda, couldas, wouldas. It's what's effective. And the question is if we ask somebody for their creative input and you're not getting it, then what's the root cause of that not happening?
It's a capacity issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. In our case, it's usually that, because it's a smallish company and people are working hard, You
have to schedule creative time. Extrovert under the Myers-Briggs, which doesn't mean that I'm expressive. It means that I get energy from people, but I also can think on my feet. Somebody that's an IS is internal and detail oriented. They need time to think about it. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So if we schedule creative time on Wednesdays at 1:00 and we say, for this week's topic, which we send out on Monday,
right,
this is what we're going to talk about. You're going to let the introverts and detailed people think about this and take the time to think about it. Mm-hmm. And there's other decision making. We use Carol Einhorn's problem solver model, which talks about 5 different types of problem solving. And the internal aspects of those different styles of problem solving creates either an expressive, additive approach to decision making or an extremely frustrating activity for different people, right? A detective wants all the data. A thinker wants all the options. Now, they want all the data for all the options,
right?
Which, if you don't create a time frame around that with some criteria that's established, they will get analysis paralysis in about 10 seconds. However, knowing the style takes away a lot of the frustration on the team.
Yes.
Because we know where our style is. And in order to be able to get to that decision moment, the adventurer or the visionary has to say, look, we need to make a decision by next Wednesday at noon. Okay. Whatever happens between now and then, we need to decide by next Wednesday. And the thinker detectives will sit there and go, I don't think that's enough time. It's never enough time. All right. So get your mind wrapped around bringing down the criteria, understanding the boundaries, and sticking to that every single time so that a decision can be made.
I'm a massive fan of constraints in any creative situation. If you don't have constraints, you can brainstorm all day long, right? So, it can and will. So that I have to set myself constraints like that.
So what I suggest is you get the book Problem Solver by Carol Einhorn. And in it, there's a QR code, and your team members could use that QR code to take the assessment for free. And you can determine then which the styles are, how those styles interact. And in her book, they talk about different biases each one of those styles have that create outcomes that might be based on the biases that you have that create ineffective outcomes.
I'll definitely check that out. Thank you. And I know
cool.
I'm really lucky. I work with a woman called Jessica Wills, who has a lot of experience studying such things. And she's also very interested in shadow work and understanding the shadow that we all bring to every interaction. And so we do a yearly retreat where our leadership kind of talks through things like that. And it sure does help to understand like when you're acting out of fear, or when you're acting out of a sense of scarcity, or when you're acting out of a fear of abandonment, or whatever it might be, right? Yeah. Or out of a form of greed. You know, we all have these shadows, right?
Yeah, fear and love are the two core emotions in all things. Because all the other things that you talked about are because of some form of fear. Yeah,
no, for sure. And trust is so important with your team. And I'm very lucky that I deeply trust all the people that I work with. There's nobody that I work with that I don't trust. Yep. So that's incredibly helpful. And, you know, that's not instant.
Oh, no. No, but understanding styles of decision-making and leadership and so on can not just add to the trust, you can have the trust and be ineffective. By going through these things, you can be a lot more effective. And one of the things you said earlier that's really important is not pigeonholing people into a role that's defined on a organizational chart.
Yeah, it's that balance of like, we have a system and we need to do it this way in order to achieve a predictable result, but also we need to have room for people to explore and grow. Otherwise, they will quickly become bored. And that's no good in an organization, right? I mean, we had one instance where we had one of our retreats, and we spent a lot of time talking about all the things that were wrong that we wanted to be better, which is good. That's valuable. Mm-hmm. And the team was like, we think the best thing to do is hire an outside company to come in and help us rebrand. Because we used to be called Jar Audio, and now we're Jar Podcast Solutions. We added video and a bunch of other services to what it is that we do. So that process, I was like, no, we're a creative agency. Like, we need to figure this out. If we can't figure it out, what business do we have telling other people how to do it, right? So it was very important to me that we do this ourselves. And the team was just at that time very overburdened and worried about all the things that needed to be done. In the end, though, because we do know who the different people are that work for us and what their strengths are, the planners, of which we have several who are excellent, sat down and planned out a slow release, time release, shift. So we didn't do it all at once. We did it over time as we were able, and it was in a coordinated way that was in line with the capacity of the employees at the time. So it took longer than maybe our CEO, my business partner, Roger, would have ideally wanted. He's very fast. He's got ADHD. He likes things to go, 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 and I was really happy in the end with how it happened, because it was the team themselves that did it. Right. And they owned it the whole way through. And that I thought was really great.
Yeah. Well, one of my leadership principles, no involvement, no commitment. Right. So when you involve people in the process, you get commitment. So here's the alternative to that, okay? Because we always talk about that. Do I involve them in it and we go down this rabbit hole forever? Or do I make a decision because somebody has to make the decision? Usually it's time bound. Mm-hmm. So what I'll do with my team is I say, we need to make a decision by Friday, okay? Mm-hmm. If we can come to consensus before then, that's what we'll do. And we're going to talk about it, argue about it, come up with ideas, be creative, and so on. If we get to Friday at noon and I have to make a decision as the CEO, I'll make a decision. Otherwise, it's consensus. But here's what happens a lot of times in organizations is the CEO or the leader of that team at that time does not express it that way. You'll have two, one will say, I'm going to make the decision. The other one will say, we're going to have consensus.
Right.
All right. And they get to Friday and they go, that's it. We don't have consensus. I'm deciding. You go, well, wait a minute.
And you didn't warn people. Yeah.
So people feel betrayed.
Right. Never good.
Never good.
Never good.
So the work, a lot of times, this is one of my phrases I talk about in the work that I do is I'm a master of the statement of the obvious. So it's obvious that hasn't worked in the past, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's try a different way. So my question to you, Jen, is when you look back on the last few years or your career, what would you have done over?
Well, I guess my mind does go back to that fateful leadership conference where we flew our East Coast team out to the West Coast. We all got together in a tiny room and it was a bit of a pressure cooker. I remember I got pretty frustrated. Like I eventually felt like everyone was just listing problems and no one was coming to me with solutions. Mm-hmm. And and that everyone was looking to like some mythical other agency on high to come swooping in and solve the problem. And then I just got frustrated. I felt ganged up on. My shadow came out.
Did you lose it, Jen?
I might have lost it. Yeah, I got a little bit emotional, and I try not. I mean, I don't mind showing emotion if I'm moved by something, but I don't like showing like that kind of frustrated, angry emotion. Sure. It's not good. I felt that I lost respect in that moment. I certainly lost respect for myself. And so if I were to go back and redo that, if I could have a do-over for that, that would be great. And I'm not sure what I would do differently, but I think I would probably sit down with my business partner in advance and say, here's the tension that I see. Here's what everyone's going to want to do. I think we need to steer them away from that and encourage them to take responsibility, even if it takes longer. Like I wish that I could have seen that in advance. And understood my own goals going in. But I think the problem was I only really realized my goals as I was experiencing the frustration.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that we try to do is I'll say to people, so Jen, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to feel that emotion that you felt at that moment very deeply. And when I'm coaching someone, I'm saying, you want to feel it right now? I says, yeah, I want you to just go deep down. I want you to feel it, feel the frustration. I want you to go into that. And I want you to feel it and think about what was happening in that moment.
Yeah.
Emotion locks in memory.
Yeah.
You will never make that mistake again. Because when you feel that, when it starts to come up in you, you will immediately think, oh, yeah, I felt that a few years ago. I better not do it again. Can we have a timeout?
Yeah, totally. I could have asked for a timeout. I need a minute. I could have. I need a minute.
I'm going to take a walk around the building. There you go. Yeah. Well, I think that's where we end it today, is to really express the need in everything that's going on around this world nowadays, is balance and care and love. And acceptance and listening and hearing, all of these things that all we can do is with those that we're with in that moment and to just be in the moment.
And listen to each other's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen, thanks so much for being on this podcast today. This has been exciting. I have no idea what we just talked about because I was just so much in the moment and listening to your stories that I loved it. So thanks so much for being on the show.
It was my pleasure, Dr. Gary. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Whether you're building a creative company or leading a team, the real test isn't what you say you stand for. It's what you're willing to preserve when it gets hard. And when you're handed big stories to tell, stories that matter to real people, the pressure gets even harder to navigate. The best leaders find a way to honor the story and stay grounded in what they believe. If something in this conversation landed, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Dr. Gary, and this is Leading from the Front.